Hi friends, my name is Kyle Malnati, and for the last 2 years I've been the host of the Kyle Malnati Show, which is a podcast and YouTube show that has been geared towards connecting with real estate investors, specifically in Denver, Colorado, and I've had a really fun time doing that. But over the last couple of years, I've started to have a more national audience that is real estate professionals, specifically realtors. And as the broker owner of my own firm, my goal is to connect with you on a national level and share some encouragement, also to empower you and to educate you with best practices from my friends. These are folks that I've met and interacted with across the country. And so we are announcing that we're going to be launching the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. It's going to be for folks that are interested in real estate brokerage and interested in getting better at what they do on a daily basis. The word calibrate is all about this intentional change, this intentional iteration, working towards a better future. And so I'm very excited to be launching this new podcast and having new episodes for you to watch. It's been a year since I've been in this room, and I'm so excited for you to watch this next episode. So enjoy the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, you are tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and we have a special show lined up for you today. Well, every show is special, right? My guest here is Dominic Petrozelli of the Petrozelli team at Keller Williams. And Dominic is based out of Burlington, Washington. Dominic's a friend of mine. We've actually shared several mastermind experiences on this very app that we're recording on called Zoom. And Dominic and I we share this special distinction where we are both Realtor Magazine 30 Under 30 honorees, which is a national platform that Realtor Magazine has provided to both of us and has made us really have this change in our career. For me, that was 2012. Dominic is a recent recipient in 2017. So Dominic, welcome. Thanks for being a part of the podcast.
Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. So Dominic, one of the things I love to talk to people about is how did you get your start? Real estate is this crazy industry, and you've got to be nuts, frankly, to be a broker, to work for free for someone, get paid 2-3 months down the line. How did you get involved in real estate, and why did you become a realtor?
You know, and I like that question because I feel like I might be out of the norm with it. I know a lot of times when I hear agents talk about getting in real estate, they're like, oh, my grandparents' real estate agent, my parents' real estate agent, my sister, but it's like family, or, they've been involved in real estate or development or construction or something like that. Or it's, it's their second or third career, for them way down the road. And honestly, I didn't have a big whole rhyme or reason of getting into it. I literally woke up one day and I was like, I think I could sell a house. I mean, that was all the thought process I had at the time. And I was working for a liquidation company at the time. We bought out boat manufacturers that were closing down and were liquidating their inventory. And that was kind of during the recession or the beginning of it when I think luxury items started to have a big hit first, and boats are kind of in that category. So I remember I went into a local Century 21 office. I, said, hey, what do I need to do to sell houses? And they said, well, you take this class online. And I mean, it was within like 3 weeks later, I was licensed and had legally the ability to sell a house. And I know that doesn't sound all that great or grand or important. And it wasn't at the time, but what it's kind of turned into is more of a story now than how it actually happened. And I realize now, being in real estate and owning my own home and owning investment properties, of the importance of net worth or growing your net worth through home ownership. I mean, I realized how important of an asset owning a home is, how great of a tool the mortgage is. And it's just like you're paying somebody's mortgage. You can choose if it's yours or somebody else's. And so friends, family, clients, I mean, I'm always trying to go for that long-term, like not necessarily holding on the property long-term, but the idea of as you're building equity in your home, you're building this net worth that can be used for so many different things, if nothing else, just for security, especially with, like my family growing up where we didn't have that. And so I really see the importance of that now. And that's kind of what this whole thing has turned into for me.
I love that. So one of my mentors is a guy that we both know because he's a superstar at Keller Williams. He's part of the Keller Williams kind of walk of fame, if you will, and it's Bo Mankiewicz. I have spoken with Bo, I've met with Bo. He's been on the Kyle Malnati show, which a lot of you are former fans of. That was a project we did for a couple of years. And Bo makes this comment, and it's so true, that real estate is one of these amazing assets that give you the ability to grow wealth and also transfer wealth. And Bo also comments that, real estate's one of the bigger issues in the world. It's what people fight about and have wars about. And so I love that you talk about someone's net worth. And as we were prepping for the show, you actually mentioned that that's actually your passion, is digging into getting someone's net worth built. And you also mentioned that that's part of your mission. So if you could talk about just how you came upon that, I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it was actually one of the things I was talking about when I submitted the video for my application for 30 under 30. And it comes from a personal story where both sides of my family growing up were really not all that well off. And I know there's a lot of stories like it was tight, and a lot of times for my family now it is still really, really rough. And there was always one thing that was never there, and it was not having this kind of security blanket of net worth. You could take that however you want, but having that ability, if you had an emergency or repair or something like that, that equity in a home is so important. And so especially building that up over time. And so after being in that experience growing up, where a lot of times when I was younger working, it wasn't for money for me, it was for money for like the family, for food. Now having the ability to grow my net worth through home ownership, it's just so empowering to be able to, help other people do that too, because you can see the potential long run of that security, or the potential of taking a chance on opportunities that come up because you're secure within your net worth or within your equity of your home. Does that make sense?
I love that. Yeah, that is something that so speaks to what I'm about. I specialize in the sale of commercial properties, specifically apartment buildings, because I believe that home ownership is one of those very important things that's part of the hierarchy of needs. Maslow talked about food, and then there's shelter. And so I think home ownership is where residential agents intersect, but then investors have the ability to provide a safe, fair housing situation for their tenants. And I absolutely love being able to work with investors because they're providing a fundamental need. And so I think that's so cool. And I think it's great that you put that into your own mission statement. We talked about this a little bit, and I want to share it again. That I think that the fact that you have a mission statement, the fact that you have a purpose is, even though it sounds like, well, gosh, every company should, what ends up happening is I don't think that there's a lot of realtors that treat their business with intentionality and are on purpose. And so I think that I commend you. And I think that's one of the things that's led to your success, that you're on purpose and you mean business.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah. And I do agree, where, especially me starting out, missing the opportunity to treat my business like a business. So a lot of it has been catch up, and a lot of it's always still improving, but yeah, treating it like a business, no matter how you look at that, by having a mission statement, by having goals, by having a profit and loss statement, which I know so many don't. It's these really fundamental things of, it's like, yeah, you're a real estate agent, but you are your own business, and you do need to treat it like that.
Absolutely. So I think what is very important in the first answer that you gave at the beginning of this question was that you became a realtor because you thought you could sell a house. And what I love to pull out of that is the old fable, the little engine that could, right? You think you can, and then all of a sudden you do. And I think there's so much power in that simple statement about becoming successful, is just having the thought first that I can be successful and I can do this, and then you do it, and that confidence builds. And so what I would say next, my next question is about success. Clearly you're recognized by Realtor Magazine this year as a 30 under 30, which that honor is both, it's both a youthful honor, but it's also a youthful with success. So I like the idea of, we're going to tie success to youth and recognize people who are young and are just kicking butt. So talk to me about the factors that led to your success. Maybe a couple of things along the way really ended up becoming those success memories for you. And as the author Jim Collins puts it, we all have luck events, right? It's all a matter of what we do with our luck and how we react to it. So talk to me about success and the factors that led you there.
Well, in definitely starting out, nothing was success. It was all failures, and it wasn't something that was like outside of my control either. Beginning out in real estate, if you know, the first couple of years were failures that were my own doing. And so the reason I was successful was like a counter of that was just being ridiculously stubborn, being like, okay, I need to make this work. But in reality, when I started out in real estate, and I have no idea why this mindset was there. I mean, I knew what I needed to do, but I wasn't doing it. And that was simply just talking to people. I mean, like all I could think about was like, how do I get home and play video games as soon as possible? I mean, that was like a big portion of my life. And, you know, you start to realize like, okay, we need to talk to people to make this happen. And it is really simple. It's just the boring stuff like making phone calls, meeting people, going to events, socializing. These are all things that I was just not super comfortable with. And so I kept not doing it, even though I knew I needed to. And fortunately, my stubbornness pulled me through where it's like, okay, I don't want to give up on real estate. And so, you know, once I was kind of made that turn, and it's still always improving, but once I made that turn, I was like, okay, we need to start talking to people. We need to start doing this. We need to start, you know, making phone calls. You know, success came from that. And it wasn't some crazy magic thing I've spent money on or anything. It was just really basic real estate stuff. So
I love that answer because what I hear in it is fundamentals, which is key. The second thing that I hear, the second takeaway that I have is that a lot of people think that they can just kind of fall into being successful in this industry, which is totally a myth. You've got to be super intentional. And the other thing that I like, and we talked in one of our past podcasts about the book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. But success is a habit. Success doesn't happen just, oh, by the way. And obviously the degree of your success, I'm a strong person of faith, and I believe that God's involved in how successful you are. And if you're doing it the right way, if you're doing it the ethical way, it's going to be longer, sustainable success. But again, it's habitual. Success is a habit. It's an intentionality. And I think that's so true. And I think so many people enter into real estate. It's very common to be like, oh, I'll sell a house or two on the side to my buddies. And, you know, this is just going to be easy. And it's a business like anything else. And you have to treat it like a business.
Yeah. And it's not complicated, but yeah, it's not necessarily easy. I mean, you have to work, you know, it's work, but again, doesn't have to be complicated work. I think we make it complicated, but it doesn't have to be. So if you are in this industry and if you're willing to work hard and if you treat people right, like that's the key to it, you know, working hard and treating people right, like you will be successful.
So the next question I have is, you know, success is fun to look at, fun to think about, but with every success, I've felt like I've been standing on a mountain of failure. You just talked about this. Frankly, the reason why I named my company as well as this podcast, the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast, is that calibration, especially if you're thinking about it from a scientific standpoint or even a military application, it is, you know what, we missed on the first try, but this is an experiment. It's an experiment. We're not going to personally own the first result. We're going to learn from it. We're going to have these failures, these little near misses, and continue to get calibrated towards our desired result. It's all about iteration. And so talk to me about failure. It's something that, you know, I think when you've had some success, it's easier to talk about failure, but especially for that person who's starting out and feels like, man, they're messing everything up. How did you learn to deal with failure? And then most importantly, talk about the learning experience of what you did after you had a failure to then succeed.
Yeah. And I like this question because it is almost painful, but I mean, it's really important thinking about it. And go back to that, what I was just talking about, where I wasn't talking to people and I wasn't doing the things I needed to do to grow my business. So when a piece of business did come by, it was a very, very important thing that I, you know, did the best I could. But I remember one of my first, you know, clients I was working with, I let them down because I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know the data. I didn't know the market. I sure as hell didn't know the paperwork that was involved in in selling a house. And that was a big failure on my part. And that's not to say that you can't learn all that or adjust really quickly. But in reality, in my head, I'm going, okay, I'm not getting business. And when business does come by, I'm messing it up because I'm not doing the things I need to be doing. And as soon as I felt that once, like a pretty big feel, I was like, okay, what do I need to do to learn the market? Okay, let's start reviewing the MLS every day, like really pay attention to what's going on. Let's be touring a lot of homes. Let's really know what's out there. Let's look at the data as a whole, like what kind of tools are out there for me to really analyze this. And then the paperwork, which I think is something a lot of agents might miss is like, we have a ton of statewide standardized forms. I mean, there's stuff for everything you can imagine. And I made it like my mission at that time to really go through all of that paperwork and not just read it, but like understand what it meant and make sure I could explain that. And I know there's obviously legal bounds where you don't want to be going too far, like you don't want to be acting like an attorney or anything, but I wanted to know what I was talking about when I was meeting with my clients, and I want to be confident in knowing what I was talking about. And so obviously the market and data and stats and the paperwork are always changing. So it's making sure in my business now that we're always keeping up to date with that. But, next client I got, I wanted to make sure that when questions came up, I knew the answers to them. And I remember once I started working on this, when I would meet with clients, they'd be throwing out questions. And I was almost like amazed that I was like spewing out these really good answers. I was like, where did that come from? And it was from the time and dedication to really know what I was talking about.
One of my favorite phrases on this subject is prior preparation prevents poor performance. And it's all about practice, right? Those P words are all about practice. And I think for you, sharing that story, but then saying, okay, well, I don't know everything about contracts, and especially being younger, both of us are millennials, both of us were 30 under 30s. And what happens there's that youthfulness that I think sometimes our clients look at it and say, you haven't been around the block too many times, have you? You're as young as my son. I get that a lot. You're as young as my kids. And so I think you can combat that by being knowledgeable and do it in such a way that doesn't feel rehearsed. One of the things I mentioned in my application to Realtor Magazine is that I impressed a client who was a realtor that owned an apartment building for her own retirement, and it had been a legacy. Her family had owned it for a very long time. She got it from her dad. And what occurred was I was standing out in front of the building, and I was pointing out all the buildings on her block, because apartment buildings are kind of a dense area where you've got a lot of buildings all in one block. And I was saying all the owners and when they bought them, just from memory. And really, it wasn't like I was trying to rehearse that. It was a function of me doing the fundamentals of updating my database, being on purpose, being a geographic farmer, and just little things like that. That won me the assignment for someone that was my parents' age, that was going to be trusting one of the biggest investments that they had with me, this guy who was in his 20s. So I think that's huge. That's a big deal. And I think anytime you can get contractual stuff really nailed down, I think that makes people, especially your very analytical people, really understand that you know what you're doing. And, we're in a state, Colorado, which is where I'm broadcasting from. It sounds like very similar to Washington, where we've got pre-printed forms, and a lot of states do this, where we don't do a lot of real estate with attorneys. And I think it is our job to be as close as you can to an attorney. Obviously, we have the limited license to practice law when you're a realtor, but that's a big deal. People feel like they can trust you if you know your stuff and stay on your deadlines. So I think with success and failure, what I like to get is very practical, very granular, very specific about best practices. And it's something you and I have talked a lot about on these video masterminds we do. I know that Keller Williams is big into best practices and big into masterminding. So talk to me about a few things that you do really, really well and are best practices in your business, so others can learn. And I think that this idea of being abundant, having an abundance mindset, which is what Keller Williams is all about, really helps us prevent from being scared about sharing what you're good at. So talk to me about your best practices.
There's a few, and there's stuff that I guess that the consumer sees, and then there's stuff they don't see, but they probably feel, I guess is the best way to put it. And up front, the first thing that comes to mind of what's unique or the best practice or what we're doing that I think is still a little bit uncommon is our use of video and our integration of video with just about everything we try to do. And I know you really love video and you're big on that, but we do all of our own video in-house. And I mean, we do really professional video tours. We do it at a really fraction of the cost, I think, what other people are spending. And that's not necessarily the most important thing. That's important for your profit and loss statement. But the idea is, a few years ago, I really wanted to get into video. So we just bought all this equipment and I had no idea how to use a lot of it, but I was like bound and determined to figure it out. I was taking a lot of online classes, using it constantly and really figuring it out. And we started to evolve this, online or this video tour for homes. And now we've turned into something that I think is honestly incredible. And just alone, like on Facebook, when we post videos, I mean, we do a lot of paid advertising for it, but just the natural sharing of it because the people like the videos is so huge for our business and our brand recognition. I mean, it's just this morning I was at the gym and I saw a daughter of some friends that I have, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, every time I'm looking up Minecraft videos, I see one of your videos." And it's like the videos, you're building that recognition because of course the branding's in there in the name, but I'm in the videos, I'm talking, I'm interacting, maybe it's a lifestyle video. I mean, we're really big on that. And we do a good job because our equipment has constantly transformed over this time. I now have guys just out of high school that's been helping me on it. And I don't know, I love it. I'm passionate about it. And we put out a really good product. And it's something that really nobody else in our area is doing. And it's something that I can market well to build that brand recognition as well as actually help promote the listing more than if I didn't have it. So.
Well, you're right. I love video. This podcast is simulcast, both video and audio. And my prior podcast that I had, the Kyle Malnati Show, was all video. And the reason I actually shared this, but the reason I love video so much is it's tangible. Just like real estate. I could have chose to be an investment banker, sell mutual funds. I could have chose some other way of helping people with their investments but I chose real estate because real estate's tangible. It's intuitive. You can go and look at a building and literally kick the bricks and try to actually see. A realtor, we're very busy. We're obviously with clients, and so much of what we do is face to face, kneecap to kneecap. And so I think if you can accelerate that process and build rapport, which is a keystone, cornerstone, of sales success, is being able to build rapport. Just ends up making your life so much easier. And so caution though, anyone who's interested in getting into video in this industry, listen to what Dominic said about the fact that it costs a lot of money and it's one of those apps that takes a lot of time and energy. And so you've got to figure out how to staff around it. And when you talk about staff, you talked about your video person, but you've also mentioned to me that your team is kind of that second secret sauce, if you will, in your business, your best practice. Talk a little bit about your team in general.
Yeah, there's 4 of us that are licensed on my team, and 3 of us are in sales, and one's kind of on the back end taking care of everything. And they all do a phenomenal job. And I guess the quick point I wanted to make about why I think we do so well and we work so well together is, and I remember watching this it was an Art Williams speech. I was from years and years ago, and it's him addressing some conference, and he was talking about his company Prime America, and this is when he started to really make it big. And he was talking about the myths in business, and one of them, or how to be successful in business, and one of them was talking about a myth of you can't get too close, you can't get to know your employees too well, you can't do all this blah blah, and all these things he named off because if it comes time to fire them, like that's going to make it more difficult. And he just said bull. I mean, that's not how it works. And so I remember him talking about that, and I've just always had that in my head, and I love how he explained it. And so in reality, our team, when we work together, I mean, we know everything about each other. I mean, Stephanie works with me, knows more about me than anybody, and so does Jen and Heather. And so we know what each other's goals are. We know each other's spouses' goals are. I mean, like we're really, really well fed into each other, I guess, and we're always supporting each other. We're really tight knit. We're really close. We're doing things together all the time. And so that camaraderie, I think, shows on the outside for clients when they see us or when they work with us. I mean, they know we're in sync. We all speak the same language, whether we're talking to a buyer or whether we're talking to a seller. And, I think they feel how much we really care about each other and how much we care about our clients. So that back end, again, it's not something people see. Maybe it's something they see later on, but I think the way to get the most out of people is really love and care about them.
Yeah, it sounds so simple. It sounds so intuitive, but yet people don't do it. And I think as I have these thoughts, as I'm listening to your your interactions with your teammates, I kind of just think back to the simplicity of probably more hours with your team than you do with your spouse, who I've decided is the most important person in my life. And I was going to get married to my spouse, but I'm going to spend more time with my coworkers on a daily basis than my spouse. And so you better like each other, right? You don't have to be perfect friends at all times. Fight every now and again. We're like brothers and sisters, but we're family. And I think if you've got this extended family through work, yes, it can be difficult at times, just like it can be difficult for me to discipline my children. That's not a lot of fun as a parent, but it comes with the territory. And when you're in leadership, leadership is messy and leadership is not easy. And so, yeah, if you have to say goodbye to a friend, that breaks your heart. But I'd rather say goodbye to a friend than have a bunch of enemies working around me that'll slit my throat if I don't watch myself. So I completely agree with you. I think it's important. I think it's really, really important to make sure that you've got a good culture around your office. Every office has a culture, by the way. It's just whether it's a good culture or a bad culture. And I think it starts with the team. It starts with people. My next question is going to go into leadership here. So I think all great leaders are readers. I think that great leaders choose to educate themselves outside of formal education, outside of school, whether it's high school or college, but continually stretching their mindset and also showing the people that are following them that they're constantly progressing and you got to keep up with me. So talk to me about some of your favorite books. I'm a big consumer of books. And so tell me about your favorite business books.
Well, the one that always just pops up first in my head, and it's a very simple book. It's not complicated. I mean, it's got little words, like, like it's perfect for me. And that's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the basic mindset behind it is, you make money, you can put money in here, which can help you grow it. It can invest it, whatever that may look like, or you can put it in here in something that's going to depreciate and not work well for you in the long run, for at least in investment purposes. And obviously there's a balance in there, right? You got to have fun too in your life. But that book, I love it just because of how plain and simple and straightforward it is. It's not rocket science. And in reality, your decision making, obviously there's really complex things you can go into when it talks about money and, or not in the book necessarily, but if you are investing in stocks or bonds or real estate, it gets more complicated than that. But in reality, the mindset's simple. It's like, do I want to grow my money with investments or do I not? And I love that. I love the simplicity of it.
Awesome. And Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I love the story he tells of having two fathers, literally, like a lot of us do when we get married. You've got your real dad and you've got your father-in-law, and how one of him, his mindset led to him being not, the poor dad, not very successful. And then the other had this mindset of, hey, we're going to grow wealth. And it was very intentional. And that marked him so much that he wrote a book about it. So that's an awesome real estate book. Talk to me about leadership books. You've got a couple of other books that you really like reading. Yeah. I share your thoughts.
I think I didn't know about, like, there's the book Leaders Eat Last, which I found that because I first read the book Start With Why, which fundamentally I love that idea of, like, really finding your reason of why you're doing stuff, or making sure you're doing things for the right reasons. Like, I love that. But you found the book Leaders Eat Last, and I knew I was going to like that book without even reading it, because just the title says like everything you need to know. And that doesn't mean you're not paying yourself or whatever it is, but it's like, if you're taking care of the people you work with and you surround yourself with, they'll be taking care of you too. And that book, Leaders Eat Last, I just thought was just awesome. And it talked about good teams. It talked about good businesses, good groups. And it was all, with that mindset of making sure you're taking care of people. And then the other one that I love for leadership was Extreme Ownership, which, like, we have real estate, which there's never an emergency in real estate. I mean, like, I've never had to perform CPR on a client yet, right? Like, there's no emergencies. But Extreme Ownership is talking about people in Navy SEALs who, they took real life combat situations and they found, reasons why they did things and the success of why they did it, and then turned that into a business application. And for one, it keeps you interested because you're always kind of, every chapter starts with like this firefight or something, which is great, right? Like it just gets me going in the book, but then it really transforms it into something that I can use in my business. And I don't know, I love that because if it works when bullets are whizzing by you and, people are getting shot and all sorts of stuff, like I guarantee you in my environment, which is really, really calm compared to being on the battlefield, it's going to be even more powerful, in real estate. So, or in any business, I guess.
The thing I love that Simon Sinek says, I've heard him speak several times, both on podcasts, and there's this awesome YouTube video that you have to look at called The Power of Why. Just type that into a search engine, Simon Sinek, The Power of Why. And Simon talks about, just to distill the thesis statement down, people don't care what you do, they care why you do it. And I love that because it's so true. People don't care about the features and benefits, or, you've got all these different things. What people really connect to is why you're doing it, what your passion is. And that's why brands like Apple have such an awesome following. It's because they connect to that why. The second author you talked about, Jocko Willink, he has a phenomenal podcast, and he is an intense dude. And I would say that both of those authors are people that you should look up if you're an avid podcast listener. So awesome recommendations on books. So my final question, I leave the best for last, and I always do that. It's like a fine wine. I leave that for last. And so I want to communicate with our audience the advice that you wish that you knew when you were 22. We're both younger guys, but we're not 22 anymore. And I feel like I have been blessed to have mentors in my life. And I feel like a good mentor will give you that. They'll put their arm around your shoulder and just say, hey, look, if I could have done this a different way when I was younger, this is how I would have done it. So talk to that person who's going to be getting into the real estate industry and share with them some advice, some tips. And we've done this throughout the podcast, but just what would that parting advice be to someone who's planning on getting into this crazy world of real estate brokerage?
It's funny you picked 22 because that's when I got into real estate. And
me too.
It's awesome. There'd be a few things I'd say. And in looking back, I'm glad I learned the way I did. I'm glad I had the experiences I did, because there's some fundamental, mindsets or activities or habits or whatever they have because of correcting course. But I do think I probably could have done that faster. And the thing is real estate agents like making things complicated. We like adding all these tools and gadgets. I love video. You have all these things that aren't necessarily needed. I think they're important. I love video, and I don't know what I'd be doing without it right now. But the boring stuff is what works. It is picking up the phone. It is going to events. It is networking, socializing, meeting people. That's how you grow your business, and that's how you do it. And it doesn't cost you any money, right? And so making sure you understand that the basics are what work and the boring stuff is what works. And then the other side of that is I always knew what I needed to do in the back of my mind when I was younger, but I wasn't doing it. And having a coach now is something that I think is huge for me. And I think when you get in, there's always coaching opportunities somewhere, or there's accountability partners. You need to have someone who's not holding you accountable, but helping you hold yourself accountable. And I think it's that mindset of, like when you buy a new car, like all of a sudden it seems like every other person on the planet owns that same car. You're seeing it constantly, but that's because it's at the top of mind, it's top of your head. And so with a coach or the accountability partner, you're always looking at the things that are like, did you make your calls? Okay, well, did you do this? The goals and the tasks that you have need to be correlated, and you need to have somebody who's making sure that you can hold yourself accountable on doing those. And so that's kind of what I wish I, had when I started out, was somebody, making sure I understood the basics were the way to go, and that somebody who was willing to really help me hold myself accountable. And I think that's what would make my growth have happened faster, right?
I love that advice. I was blessed to have a few mentors really close to me in my 20s, one of which was a 30 under 30 honoree in 2005, and he's my wife's cousin. He means the world to me, and he would say stuff like that to me, and a lot of times as a punk kid I wouldn't listen to him, but eventually after grinding it in, I would listen to him. And so I think that's great advice. And I think that's a big deal to have someone who's been there before to tell you, hey, look, it may not be flashy, it might not be all that interesting, but the fundamentals are the way that you succeed. And we've talked about that, being methodical, being on purpose, and that's great advice. All right, so before I let you go, I've got a surprise for you. I didn't tell you I was going to be doing this, but I am giving you, as a gift for being on our podcast, an autographed copy of one of our past podcast guests. She wrote a book. We talked about being readers, Real Estate Success in 5 Minutes a Day. And it's great because it's literally a daily devotional, a little story, a little pick me up. She can be your mentor in writing. Karen shares a quote that is a famous quote, and I love it because I think it really does a good job of tying a bow around what we've been talking about, Dominic. So the quote is, in the words of Aristotle, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And I think that perfectly summarizes our discussion together. And I think that these types of venues, whether you're on video with someone, in person, or even if you're just consuming a podcast, you've never met the person before, that's the way to get better. And so, Dominic, I know that our audience is far better for having heard your wisdom. Thank you for sharing. This has been such an important situation for me to be able to be the podcast and the host here. And so thanks again for Dominic Petrozelli of the Petrozelli team of Keller Williams in the state of Washington. I'm Kyle Malnati, and as I love to say, we will see you around the neighborhood. Bye, everybody.